Welcome to the March to a Million podcast with Greg DuPont, founder of the Wealth Solutions Network. In this podcast, Greg shares his journey to positively impact 1 million lives by creating an army of financially minded attorneys who embrace an expanded role in their clients' lives. Greg and his guests challenge the status quo in the legal profession and the financial services industry, and show attorneys how they can improve their lives, provide greater value to their clients, and experience greater professional satisfaction. Join us in this movement and strengthen your business by learning how to solve your clients' most pressing financial problems.
Hello and welcome to today's very special edition of my March to a Million podcast. Today, I've actually flipped the tables on my sidekick here and general host, Matt Halloran, because today Matt is my special guest because Matt has just produced his labor of love. His new book came out. And, you know, in this world of buying credibility, it's very easy for a guy like me, a guy like the listeners of this program, to write a couple of checks. And next thing we know, we've got a book. It's got published. And if we got to the right channels, we can say we're a number one bestseller. As a matter of fact, I am a number one bestseller for a fraction of a second on Amazon for a niche category. That's another story for another day. But Matt's done this the old-timey hard way, put in the blood, sweat, and tears to create and produce, as I said, his labor of love. Because as we were talking off mic here, this is part of his mission. The podcast here is my March to a Million mission. Matt, what is your mission and how is it reflected in the book that you have produced now?
So I realized really over COVID, when our business model here changed substantially and everything moved digital, everybody's world moved digital too. And I had kids that were sophomores in high school at the time. Actually, I'm sorry, they're going into their junior year. And I just realized how lonely everybody was because we were forced to isolate, right? We were forced to quarantine. And so what ended up happening was studies started coming out that were saying we're in an epidemic of loneliness here. And the reason why is because everybody's screaming into the void, expecting people to show that they're listening. But the problem is, Greg, is nobody's teaching anybody to how to show that they're listening. You know, there's active listening, which, by the way, doesn't work digitally. There has to be a way to truly show people that they're being heard, because that makes people feel less lonely. There's more of a connection. Because I mean, this is really at epidemic levels. And so I wrote the book, literally page for page from a, very disciplined standpoint. I created a really great team of surprising people who are all really close friends of mine, dude. Like the editor I've known since he was 14, Derek Pollard, the woman who did the interior layout of the book sang at my wedding. Her husband is the person who did the design work on the book. He did the cover, he did the logo, he did the artwork. He also wrote the music that is going to be for the audiobook. So it was a real all-star team. But that's the goal, is to get people to learn how to listen.
So, we've got two layers of this, right? In modern society, first, most people don't even bother looking up from their PDAs anymore, their cell phones, as it were, and actually, we even want to try to listen. But in our business, the attorneys, the financial advisors, and everything, listening is a skill that we all have to learn and adopt, because again, we're not being trained that way. So can you kind of take us into some of the science or your background that led you to some of the methods that you talk about in the book?
Well, I'm going to go way back on you real quick. So when I was about 8 years old, my grandmother said to me, Matt, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You should be listening twice as much as you talk. And really, here's the thing. She's just telling me to shut up, right? Which I totally understand that now, looking back on that many, many years later. But so my background is actually technically interviewing people. So I have a master's level certification as a life coach. I was a therapist for a number of years. I worked with adults with severe and persistent mental illness, helping teaching them life skills. I worked at a place called Boys Town where we taught at-risk teenage boys and girls social skills. And then in my current iteration, interviewing financial services professionals and just doing interviews on podcasts. I've done about 3,000 interviews. And there's been a common thread. I get done with the interview and almost everybody says, that was one of the best interviews I've ever had. And then I go back and listen to it, Greg. Dude, I didn't say hardly anything at all. I use some very specific techniques: redirection, rephrasing, reframing. I'm always listening for pace, pentameter, voice inflection, and tone and volume. So I use these things, which, by the way, are wildly applicable in sales. So many people just go into selling something to, that person sitting across from them because they have to sell. I get it. I do all of the sales for the company that I am a co-owner of now, but they just don't listen. They're not listening to the finer points of the little things that are happening in the conversation that will make that whole closing process or the sales process even easier.
It was about, I'd say, generously 10 years into my journey into selling financial services as part of my approach to the marketplace, where I came upon a phrase from, Zig Ziglar or somebody like, those people, that was, telling is not selling. And that resonated with me because at that point, I knew that up until then, all I was doing was telling people, the features and benefits, telling people, why what I've got's better than the X guys, telling them why they need this. And it wasn't until I started recognizing the flaw of that approach and trying to learn how to be a better listener. That's when I started seeing my needle move. And off air, we talked a little bit about some of the old techniques. And we didn't put a label on it, but I'm going to put the NLP, neuro-linguistic programming language on it, the matching and mirroring, all those kind of things that are quote unquote techniques of listening. And you made a comment that, no, those really aren't really effective anymore. And, with all the time that you spent counseling people, let alone interviewing people, you've had to really learn how to get behind the eyeballs into the head. And there's only one way to do that. That's by listening to what's going on. So help me get behind your eyeballs into your head a little bit here.
Well, so it's scary in there, brother, just so you know. I just want to be clear. So one of the big things that I talk about in the book is called holding space. As an old DJ, dead air was like the worst thing you could ever possibly have on the radio. But that's exactly what you need in this. So many, many moons ago, I studied under a guy named George Kinder. He's the father of holistic financial planning. He taught something called the 5-second rule. I've changed it some. I actually call it the dramatic pause, because I don't want people so fixated on the time as the intention. And that's really the foundation of this whole book is it's engaged listening. It's listening with intention. Instead of just having listening be something passive, which is what we think, listening should be something that you're engaging in. But holding space is the key. And here's the dramatic pause. So you're in a sales situation, right? Or I'm trying to get somebody to reveal their problem when I was a therapist. The best way to do that is literally uncomfortable silence, because they are going to fill that space before you do if you have the discipline. And this is a great exercise for all of your listeners. So the next time you ask somebody a question, or you engage somebody in a conversation, when they get done talking, here's what I want you to do. I want you to pause. You don't need to maintain eye contact because that can get a little creepy. You can break eye contact as if, which you should be, you're thinking about what they just said. So you're going to break eye contact, and what you're going to do is you're going to take a deep breath, not like a crazy one, like you're just going to take a nice deep breath through your nose, and you're going to exhale as slowly as you can, looking away, and you're going to give that person space. what happens is then they are like, oh my God, they're being very thoughtful. They're thinking about what I'm saying. What I'm saying must be really smart. Ooh, I want to keep talking about this because it's something important to me. And then they keep talking. Greg, if you do that two times, right? Just take that break 2 times. The level of depth, or in sales, their actual true presenting problem is right in front of you. And it takes 5 to 7 minutes to do this. It takes 5 to 7 minutes to do this. You're going to uncover exactly what is the real issue on why they came into you today. If you just shut the F up and give them that space, makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, as you're mentioning that, I was thinking about our prior guest, Ari Galper, who is a expert in trust-based selling. I've done some training with, and those 2 concepts apply in both what you're talking about and what he was talking about. That we just gotta shut the F up and listen, and a WSN member that's an attorney, we're wired to talk. We're wired to give our expertise. We're wired to give the answers. We're wired to give the solutions. And as Ari was talking about in our podcast a few months ago, that's not what they want. They want to connect. And that simple 2 pauses you said, to really start connecting, to be able to put that into your intentional approach to a meeting. And I said that deliberately because this is not a script or anything like that. It's what are the few things that you can do as you frame for your conversation with a client or prospect in the matter, that can really move the needle. And if you just have a little note and I'm going to do this now, I'm going to make a little note to myself, 2 pauses as part of my pre-meeting ritual, as it were, to be able to come back here in a few weeks and say, Matt, that was genius.
Yeah. Two additions to that. If after you take this dramatic pause and they are still not saying anything, you can use a couple, because you used the word script. So I want to give your listeners a couple of actionable things. So the first one is saying, wow. Because again, I'm reinforcing that they're saying something that's important. Or what you can say, which I absolutely love this, is, would you tell me more? Not tell me more. Would you tell me more? And when you use this, is also a very neurolinguistic programming technique, but when you're using such an open-ended, vague question, I'm not telling them what I think is smart. I want them to realize what's smart. And then they keep going. And that's really when the floodgates happen. And it's fantastic. But I'm going to digress very quickly and tell you a little story. So I got back from studying with George, and I had been away from my wife for the first time really in our relationship up until that point. My kids were about 3 years old, 4 years old. And it was busy, right? She was working. My wife is a retired teacher. Yeah, I have twins, which is insane. But I called her every single solitary night. I was in Estes Park, Colorado, not far from Omaha, Nebraska, where we were living at the time. But every day, all we did was practice listening. I mean, there was a lot of other stuff too, but we really honed the skills of this. And I came home and my kids were already in bed. I got home kind of late. And I hugged my wife. I kissed my wife. I said, hey, I'd love to just go out on our back porch, because we had built this nice brick patio with a fireplace. So we started a fire. We sat out there and we're sitting in our chairs next to each other. And I said, tell me about your week. Now, mind you, Greg, we talked every night. For an hour every night. This is when you had to pay for minutes too, by the way. So anyway, 2.5 hours passed. I said, wow, and tell me more. We get done. It's starting to get late, and I had to work the next day. And so she's like, let's go to bed. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm pretty pooped. So we get up and we walk to go to the back door, and she grabs the handle and she turns to me and she said, what happened to you in Estes Park? That was one of the best conversations we ever had. I didn't say anything. But that's how you build relationships. When you truly understand what engaged listening really is and how powerful it is, you can use it for good or you can use it for ill. I choose to use it for good. I choose to make people feel heard because I know that that's what people are craving today. Whether that's in a leadership position, a sales position, a couples, situation, it's always about, it's not about you. And if you can make the intention about the other person, that freaking changes everything.
As you started with the loneliness being an epidemic, people are behind their screens. They're not in community anymore. They find themselves in something that's close to a community even. It's mostly talking at each other and not listening to each other. So this is a noble cause to try to get more people actively listening to each other. And I think if we could have some listening in the political spectrum, that might help as well. Again, and the science behind this. Maybe you can share a little bit of that because that's the way we're wired as humans.
Yeah.
We need to have this connection, and that is the great failing of our technology-based society, that we're not connecting. Can you tell me more?
Yeah. So it has been studied ad nauseum, the fact that we are truly social beings, and what social beings mean isn't necessarily just proximity, which, by the way, is an important component. That's why a lot of people, younger people, say IRL in the real world, in real life. Sorry. So when they have friends, they have IRL friends, and then they've got online friends, and it's an important distinction. But even when you're in a digital environment, you can show people you're listening, and you can do it. It's very, very simple. When somebody does share something on, let's just say, social media, if you just say thank you, that goes a long way, because they're going to be notified that you said thank you because you're commenting on one of their comments or one of their posts, like, hey, this was really wonderful. Thank you for sharing this. These are all really easy things that you can do to show people that you're listening in the digital world. But I think that the lines have been blurred so much, Greg, between what you're allowed to do on behind the screen, that anonymity or that sort of armor that a lot of people feel that they have online, compared to what you do in person. The desire is still the same. It doesn't matter if it's somebody who's screaming at somebody in a restaurant because of, they wore a shirt that said something they are not, and this is either side of the aisle or really, across any spectrum here. They just really want to be heard and listened to and validated. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. In fact, I was just watching a video earlier today of a pretty famous movie star, and he was wearing a shirt that was inflammatory on purpose, and he's married to another famous TV and movie star, and so this guy starts yelling at him, hey, kick this guy out. He's wearing this shirt. He shouldn't be wearing this. And so what he ended up doing is he ended up buying the guy's dinner. And instead of doing what a lot of us do, he validated and made sure that this person felt heard. And he said, listen, I'm sorry that the shirt that I'm wearing upset at you. I just bought your dinner just to say I'm sorry. And so, in my household, raising my twins, we have a family motto. And to this day, if you ever meet my children, you can say, hey, what's the Halloran family motto? And it's always to be the better man. And I think that illustrates a lot of things. Number one, taking the high road. Number two, showing that you're listening and you're validating. Even if you don't agree, I'm saying validating, not agreeing, right? I just want that person to know that I heard them, and just the amount of power that you have as the listener it's absolutely immeasurable.
As we've talked about throughout many of our episodes, as WSN is one response to technology and its impact on the practice of law, the financial planning world, and AI and all that kind of stuff. The more that you can master these human skills, the more that you not only firm up your current and prospective relationships, but the more that you firm up your future. Because this is something that is not going to be taken away by AI. There's studies that show that that the AI can actually be as empathetic, if not more empathetic, mechanically than human. But these soft skills that Matt's talking about, these are the skills that preserve your own viability.
Yeah.
And so as we kind of wrap today, Matt, so, take inside the book a little bit. What would be the benefit of somebody investing a couple hours in reading that book, and I'm sure highlighting a lot of stuff?
Yeah. So a couple of quick things. I go over 7 different types of engaged listening. I also go through the 5 different types of communicators, which is an important thing to understand who you're communicating with. They're skydivers, they're hang gliders, they're water skiers, snorkelers, and then deep sea divers or scuba divers, which we don't need to get into that. But it's fascinating when people read that chapter of the book and they say, "Holy crap! You just gave me a quick, easy, like a cheat code or a hack on life to find out exactly what that person really wants from me." Because again, that's a huge part of, engaged listening and being intentional with what you're doing, entering into those relationships. But it is a very, very short read, by the way. It's only like 150 some odd pages. Most people read it in a couple of hours in one sitting. It's meant to be a very easily digestible book. But what's really important about it is there's exercises. So I gave you one exercise, which is the dramatic pause, which all of you can use that immediately. But the other one I want to leave your audience with today is tracking how hard it is not to talk. This is right in the beginning of the book when I'm talking about listening to listen, not listen to respond. And the idea here is very simple. When you engage in a conversation with anybody, I want you to start paying attention to the feeling that you have that is sometimes overwhelming, that you need to talk, because here's the deal. You need to be heard too. And I understand that. And I don't want people to think that the whole book is just about just listening. It's also understanding when people are listening to you. But what I want you to do is I want you to just sit in that feeling and say, "Oh my God, all I want to do is talk right now." And start tracking how often, when you have that epiphany and then you don't do it, just see what happens. And it's a game changer in work. If you're a leader, if you have team members or employees, if you're in a relationship, or if you're trying to close some business, if you just allow yourself to sit in that uncomfortable silence, it changes everything.
So, Matt, the book is available on Amazon, Kindle, I believe, as well, and you've recorded the audio version that's going to be released sometime in the near future, if I understand correctly.
Absolutely, yeah. And you can also go to my website, matthalloran.com, to find out a little bit more about, maybe having me come do a workshop or speak at your conference, and you can also pick up the books there.
And the link for the book will be in the show notes, because Matt's production team is going to make sure it goes there, right, Matt?
I sure hope so, man.
So, Matt, I've enjoyed being on this side of the mic with you today. And so on this time, on behalf of my guest, Matt Halloran, and myself, thank you for taking your time and listening to the March to a Million podcast, and see you on the other side of the mic.
Thank you for listening to the March to a Million podcast. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available, and get in touch with our team by visiting our website at www.wealthsolutionsgroup.biz, or give us a call at 614-432-8065. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Wealth Solutions Network. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice from qualified financial service providers with any questions you may have.